Welcome to another episode of Closed Mode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, and today I'm really lucky to be with Debra Senra, who's VP of Sales and Client Experience at 3Flow. Debra, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I'm also excited because you're a fellow Chicagoan. That is Chicagoan a word?
It is now. So yes, I'm a Chicagoan.
Cool. And today we're talking about something that I think is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, which is hiring salespeople. And you seem to have a lot of views on that, and I think some interesting insights. So let's start with sort of what exists. Like what are the legacy approaches or the typical trends in hiring enterprise sales reps?
The one that jumps to mind for me that is a sales leader that hires only college athletes.
Yeah.
Or sellers that look and act like the person doing the hiring. Both of those things are very antiquated and will not take an organization to where we need to be in the future, even if it got them to where they are today.
Well, and that was going to be the next question is, why, if I'm kind of hiring in my own image or maybe some image of what I want to be, why do companies believe those are going to yield results? And maybe you just said that it had worked for them in the past. Is that maybe the reason why?
I think that's part of it. I think things like hire college athletes, there are talking points as to why people do that.
Yeah.
But I think we backed into that profile as opposed to starting with that profile. And ultimately, I think the biggest thing is sales has, especially tech sales, has been a male-dominated field where charisma and charm and ego were highly valued against other skills that maybe weren't as showy.
Yeah.
And so the sales managers had a lot of that and looked for that in the people that they were hiring because they were successful. And so people like them would be successful. I also think there's some bias in hiring as well. But I think a lot of sales managers, if they're honest, hiring people that looked like them and talked like them and acted like them didn't result in people who performed like them. We were looking at the wrong characteristics. So it got us to where we are, not because those sellers were successful, but I would say because of market dynamics, like the ability to overstaff your team.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe other people are in a better position than me, but we're just not living in a world where I can justify overstaffing my team to account for underperformers. I need to hire people and get them to perform.
Yeah. And so speaking of the world we're living in, so if we look at kind of the legacy approach, are there bigger shifts that also impact why? Because maybe that was effective back in the day. So what is it that's changed that makes us rethink how we hire salespeople?
I think there's a couple things. I think a lot of companies that focused on SMB are now being pressured to go up market, and they think what worked in SMB will work in enterprise, and it's a completely different beast. I think COVID accelerated something that was already happening, which is the outbound motions they weren't as effective as they have been in the past. Right. And so we needed to rethink how we generate interest. I think the average purchase is more scrutinized these days. So there are more people involved. It's a more emotional thing to buy something. You take responsibility for it working. I think that's heightened. And then in the VC-backed SaaS space, we're no longer in a period where you can light money on fire to grow. Growth at all costs, that's not what I'm hearing from investors.
Yeah.
The good investors never said that, but a lot of them, especially in 2021, like growth at all costs. And that's just not where we are. And so we're living in a world where we have to do more with less and where the tolerance for failure is lower.
I wonder, something comes to mind that I actually feel strongly about, that, a lot of people will say, well, sales is relationship business. And I think when I go back to being a sales leader, a salesperson, and in the past, it was highly tied to relationship. And I just had this sort of, I was going to say discussion, I'll call it argument with someone the other day, that human relationships in today's world come from me making Debra be successful. those relationships used to come from us drinking or sailing, whatever it is we're going to go do together, or golfing. What's your perspective on that? I feel maybe I should formulate a better question for you, but I feel like there's a shift in the human relationship thing where a lot of bias used to be toward, if I like you, I'm going to buy from you. That was the metaphor, right?
I still think that exists. Just the I like you is more nuanced.
Yeah.
So as a buyer, I don't golf. I don't enjoy it. So somebody who wants to take me on a golf course
Yes.
is not, I don't, that's not my jam.
Yeah.
There was a time in my career where even as a buyer, I felt pressure to be on a golf course. There was one stereotype of where relationships were built, how they were built, and the type of people that you should have relationships with.
Yeah.
And I think that's changed, and it's going to continue to change as we get more diverse in senior leadership roles and in the roles where your buyers sit. If you go on TikTok, as an example, and you look up sales videos, that's all you need to do to understand the archetype of sellers in B2B world. It's white male, gross, kind of believes in himself more than he probably should.
Yeah.
Charismatic, charming,
Yeah.
and that is, for a lot of people, you want to be friends with that guy. A lot of people do not.
Yes.
And so as our buyer groups get more diverse, the relationship that you build, if you're an introvert that likes taxidermy, you might have an easier time building a relationship with a buyer than the archetype of what a salesman used to be.
Wow. Yeah, I just kind of scribbled down diversity. I had that. You're right on what the profile's been, and you're right that the profile doesn't reflect the reality of the marketplace, and that's a really, that's a really powerful thought that hadn't come to me for sure. And it's diversity in all kinds of things, right? It's yeah.
I also think the world of buying has gotten really noisy. I don't know about you, but I probably get 30 emails a day from people trying to sell me something.
Yes.
And so that wasn't the case 20 years ago. And so somebody getting into my heart and soul by talking to me, that's a more friction-filled path to my relationship, my heart, than somebody who listens to me.
Yeah.
And so the person that's really good at talking, I think for a lot of buyers, there's a shift away from that person. You absolutely have to be articulate. You absolutely have to be clear and capable of communicating your value. But what I've experienced is that buyers have a stronger appetite to be heard than to be told, more so than even 10 years ago when I was selling. And so the ability to get someone else talking is a skill set that I think is more important than the ability to eloquently talk.
I just saw a really damning stat, and it was a buyer study done by a sales industry analyst, and the stat that came up was that sellers are the ninth place out of 10 that buyers go to for insight. So
Yeah.
what? And I think that the thing that I would throw back at you is so if the fundamental role, we're hiring salespeople who could develop relationships. I think that was sort of the archetype you talked about before, and now I think that stat just clicked in my head that makes come alive the problem that you're talking about. Like we're hiring based on that old model, and now buyers are saying you're about the last place I go to for insight. So what does if the fundamental role of a rep was relationship, what is it now?
Well, I think it's still the same. Good reps build relationships off of strong business value,
Yes.
as opposed to you get strong business value off of relationships.
Yeah.
And I think the skill sets that come with that are different. So I've already mentioned the ability to get somebody else talking is more important
Yes.
than the ability to talk.
Yeah.
I listened to, I feel like somebody on a step and repeat that forgot the name of the designer of their outfit. I'm forgetting the name of the speaker I heard share this insight. So I'll follow up and I'll share it. But He likened selling to being a Trojan horse, that you want to ask people questions and get them talking. And by doing that, plant the seed of pain or a need for your product that they surface for themselves. That you don't say, you have this pain and here's my solution. That by getting them to talk, they come to the realization, oh my gosh, I have this pain, and oh my gosh, I need a product to solve it. And at that point, they remain the expert in what they do. And you can come in as the expert in what you do and talk about how your solution solves for that pain.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to hear a seller say, you as the head of sales have a pain that you can't prospect and I can tell you how to do that.
Yeah.
I'm immediately like, whoa, you don't know me?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know that that's my pain.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It is, but
no, I think that's so right on. And it goes to that hero's journey thing, right? That you as the rep are not the hero. And I think we were hiring heroes.
The hero.
And the customer's the hero. Yeah. And that's what I just heard you say. Yeah.
That's it. And I also, going back to the college athletes make great sellers. I absolutely would hire a college athlete just as much as I would hire a theater major.
Yeah.
Just as much as I would hire an introvert. All of these people can be amazing sellers. And depending on the business that I'm in and what I need from my sellers, they can all be amazing. But to your point, what I look for in a seller is the ability to make someone else the hero. And there's a healthy dose of ego balanced by a healthy dose of humility.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I worked with a consultant for many years who was a West Point grad, and he was in his mid 60s, and Hugh used to call it humble confidence. As sort of
humble confidence.
Yeah, and I really like that because you don't want someone shivering that's selling to you, but yeah, I think making and you made me realize, by the way, like I have this huge bias. I went to night school for undergrad and weekend school for graduate school. So I tend to like people who didn't follow the traditional model. And you're right. There's some benefit there. That person's got the ability to work really hard if they worked and, did it all evenings and weekends. But should that be the lead criteria? Yeah. What do you have sort of force ranked? What would you say are the top 2 or 3 criteria you think are really important today?
So there's universal criteria, and then there is product and business specific criteria. The universal criteria is you've got to have somebody that's resilient. Doesn't mean that they're unemotional. Oftentimes your sellers are very emotional, but the truth is, even in the best business, they will be told no more times than they are told yes. Yeah. And if they are going to need a week off to recover from every no, this is not the career for them. You need to be able to take it, let it roll off your back, and move on. That needs to be balanced with a beginner's mindset. And this is especially important if you're hiring for senior seller roles. That I find even somebody who has been wildly successful, when you come into a new company, you have to be open-minded to learning new things. And so a beginner's mindset and somebody who believes there is always something to learn. And just because I'm not good at something today doesn't mean it's wrong, and it doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means I'm a beginner. That's really important at all stages of selling. And then the last thing is communication, but that's the umbrella for like you said, they can't be shivering when they're talking to a prospect, but they have to command a room and have presence and show up to the person they're selling with as a peer, as opposed to a parent-child relationship. But they also have to be an expert at getting the other person to talk. So those are my universals. Yeah. And then depending on the business, and this is where I think a lot of sales leaders fall flat, is they have their list of universal requirements for sellers. And that's what they go hire for without thinking through, well, somebody can be an amazing seller in one company and fail miserably at another. So what are the skill sets that I'm looking for that somebody needs to be amazing in my business? Yeah. And depending on your buyer, your product maturity, do you have a bunch of competitors? Are you creating a new category? Is it transactional? Is it enterprise? there are must-have
Sure.
skills that are
Yeah.
unique to your business, and you need to, this is the hard work. It is not bouncing from meeting to meeting. The hard work is the 2 to 3 hours on your calendar with nothing scheduled, where you just need to think
Yeah.
and simplify.
Yeah.
And so that varies, but it is equal, if not more important than understanding your universals.
Something that came to mind when you're talking about listening skills, and not surprisingly, I've heard a lot of this on this show in the last month, of people saying we're still not getting there. But what came to mind is empathy and compassion, like two things we might be looking for in the salesperson of today, that definitely is not in that old model, because I think that's driving the listening. That's like the leading indicator. So yeah, you just made me think through that. And so my question is, like, how so this, then, if we get down to a really tactical level, the traditional interview questions really don't work. Do you have a model, or I don't want to say tricks because that sounds unfair, but a trick to find out what someone really thinks and believes and feels? What do you think are good interview questions or methods?
Yeah, I would say empathy is one way to put it. I also, curiosity is a word that I often use when I'm looking for candidates.
Yeah.
And I actually find it's pretty easy to screen for curiosity. One easy way is, how much time do I spend talking versus do they spend talking? And typically in an hour interview, I plan interview questions for 40 to 45 minutes. And then I leave the last 20 to 15 minutes open for their questions. The best candidates don't wait until the end to ask me their questions. The interview very much feels like a conversation. And so when I get to the last 15 minutes, I say something like, gosh, I know I told you I'd stop at the end of this session to ask your question, but this has been a really dynamic conversation. Are there any other questions that you have, or would you mind if I keep going? Because it's been a conversation the whole time. Good but not great interviewees, I say, thank you for answering all my questions. We've got 20 minutes left. What do you have? What are your questions of me? And they don't come with like a notepad where they like read their question. Okay, my first question is, how do
Right.
you like working at the company?
Yeah.
Thank you. Next question. Like, they might have a few questions that they've written down, but their goal in that phase is not to get their questions answered. It's to get a better understanding of something that they know that they're scoping. So the equivalent in a sales process, what I often tell sellers is, do not write yourself a list of questions for discovery. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have questions written out, but where you should start is, what are the things you need to understand at the end of this call to feel like you've done great discovery?
Yeah.
And maybe it's buying authority.
Yeah.
Great. Write down 5 questions that you would ask to get to buying authority, because I guarantee you, asking who has the authority to buy, you might get an answer
Yeah.
to the question,
Yeah.
but I don't know that you're getting an answer to what you're really looking for. And so somebody might have some questions written down, but they know, I'm trying to understand what it would be like to work for her.
Yes.
I'm trying to understand, how likely is it that I'm going to be successful? I'm trying to understand if the most successful people there mirror who I am, so I can de-risk this jump for myself. And when they ask the question, it's often imperfect. They often, I'm a tactile thinker, so you see hands a lot. The questions come out kind of fumbly because they haven't prepared a list. In real time, they're trying to understand, and they're reacting to what I'm saying, and new questions are coming into their mind that they couldn't have planned for. And it feels different than the, Brian, how do you like Chicago?
Yeah.
Thank you. Brian,
Yeah.
what color is your favorite color? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, they sound like pageant questions. So that's what it felt like. So what I heard from you is that like you're getting evidence, real time evidence, right now, based on the way that dialogue's going. The other thing I heard too is kind of situational awareness, like how is someone reading the room, and yeah, I really like that, because the question was sort of like, what do you do in the interview? And I think as interviewers, we go in with those canned questions. And you just made me realize, like, if you can get some evidence and some situational awareness and a person's ability to read the room, those are cool goals to me.
I give the same advice for interviewers is what are you trying to learn about this candidate?
Yeah.
And then come up with 5 questions that could help you answer that.
Yes.
And then listen and be engaged in the conversation. And if you interview with me, what you'll often find is I'll start with a broad, open-ended question. And I'm an enthusiastic interrupter. And so I will likely interrupt you at some point and ask a follow-up question or pick at something like, wait a minute, I don't understand that. You said this and then this, help me reconcile those two things. And it's because I'm not interviewing you to get you to answer my questions. I'm interviewing you to understand if you're a fit for my role. Every human being has value. It's not to figure out if you have value to join my organization. It's to figure out if your value aligns to what I need.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how this has been something I've grown more interested in lately is EQ. And for those who aren't fans as I am, and maybe you are, it's like, to me, EQ by and large is the ability to read a room and understand your own emotions and those kind of things. And I feel like that's an important skill today. And I see a lot of people in my field where I feel like they're falling down because they're not reading the room. They don't have that high EQ. They didn't pick up on something. How do you feel about that as a skill?
I think that's really important. I think people in sales tend to have it a bit more naturally than, say, folks who are drawn to other functions.
Right.
What I often find is that when a revenue leader appears to be lacking EQ, it's often not that they don't read the room and read that something's going wrong, but they don't know how to fix it, or they don't feel empowered to fix it. So I'm pitching my product and people are checking their phone and turning off their Zoom cameras. That most people that I work with and that are drawn to revenue can feel and multitask like this is not going right. They just don't know how to fix it.
Right.
And so that, depending, if you're a transactional seller, that might not be a big deal if somebody doesn't know how to fix it. If you are an enterprise seller and you don't know how to pause and reset in real time, you're going to really struggle, especially in this market.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's such a great answer. And for some reason, it pulled me back to the thing you said earlier about failure, or like we're going to get our asses kicked a lot in sales. And it's like extracting that. I mean, you're right. The obvious question is, all right, Deborah, how do you handle it when you get your clock cleaned, But yeah, it's like discerning that. It's another thing you have me thinking about. It's like, how do you discern that from somebody? How do you determine how they recover from that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can ask, tell me about the last deal you lost. When did you lose it? How did you figure it out? I often find, tell me about the last time you were profoundly unhappy at work.
Yeah.
What did that look like? Or even tell me about an obstacle in your life that was really hard.
Yeah.
And my husband says that there's something about my personality that attracts authentic selves in others. He jokes that we'll be at a restaurant and he'll get up to go to the bathroom and he'll come back and a complete stranger will be like hugging and crying me, telling me how much they hate their kids.
Yes.
And he's not wrong. It's
right.
People have a tendency to show up and just drop their guard. And what I often find, and maybe this is my superpower, is that when I start to ask questions about failure, very quickly, 2 types of people emerge. People who talk about failure as something that was imposed on them or that they suffered with, and people who talk about failure as a timeline issue, meaning this was a moment where I failed, but it wasn't the end of the story. And if I just extend the clock, if I keep the movie playing, just 20 minutes longer, it worked out and I kept going and I didn't let it stop me. And that I feel like the folks that can see failure as a timeline issue tend to have longer careers in sales. Oftentimes I will say your lone wolf, your top sales rep can often be the former, the people who cannot handle failure. And what tends to happen with those folks is they absolutely crush it. They exceed their quota month after month after month for 20 months in a row. And then they miss on their 21st month and they're gone in their 22nd.
Yeah.
And so it's not that they can't add value to your organization.
Yep.
But you can't build a 3-year strategy against those folks. They will deliver a ton of value while they're there. You try to keep them as long as you can. But when they fail, and we all fail at some point, you need to know that they will likely.
Yeah, I went back to it because it is such a big deal and it's a big part of our life. And I was just on a website this morning. A company it's called the Sales Health Alliance, and it's about emotional health, which is I was so happy to see because it's such a big part. And I'm thinking back to a partner of mine. Oh, this was probably 15 years ago, and I remember, Deborah, the moment sitting in my truck in a Target parking lot up near Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and something bad just happened. And my partner Carrie said to me, "You suck at failing. You're really good when things are going well, like you throw the money around, you spread the cheer, but you suck at failing." And so I called my mentor Leo, who lives in Evanston near you, and Leo is this gravelly old bear, and I said to Leo, okay, so Carrie said this to me, she's right. I don't want I don't want to suck at failing. And he said to me in his Leo voice, "Dietmar, how many times have you failed?" And I went, as a salesperson, like I was like, well, not a ton actually. And he said, well, you do suck at it, but it's getting better at failure, like is a proactive strategy, right? For those of us who do this for a living.
Especially those of us who are perfectionists
Yes.
and type A personalities and like to be the A+ student in the class. Failure is especially hard, and it is an emotional skill to learn. It's not, I don't want people to hear, you should practice failing.
Right.
That's not what I
Right.
mean. It's, you will fail. We all do in personal and professional situations. It's okay to take that hard, but you have to find a way through it. And I had a mentor once tell me, a good job, you should probably hate your job like one day out of every week
Right.
or 2 weeks. If you don't feel that way, if you don't have those frustrating days, you're not challenging yourself.
Yeah.
But if you start to notice that you hate your job 3-4 days a week, 5 days a week, every single day, that's, in my mind, there's a difference between surviving a failure and staying in an environment where you are not the right fit for the seat, and failure is constant.
Yeah.
I believe terminating people is one of the kindest things you can do sometimes. That if you have the right person in the wrong seat and you don't have the right seat for them, letting them sit there hurts them. It erodes their confidence, as opposed to taking action, doing something that's hard, and getting them into a position where they can learn to fail, but failure isn't baked into their existence. It's not good for the human psyche to fail after fail after fail. If you're okay with that, go be a founder.
Yeah, I don't. Right, exactly. I don't want it. So my last question for you is: so are you finding any interesting places to find candidates? Because as I think through a lot of the shifts we've talked about, we should also be shifting not only what happens in that tactical interview, but where we go look for them. And anything interesting come to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, 2 of the best hires I've ever had, I found at Nordstrom's. So retail establishments talk about ability to navigate difficult customer situations, grit, charisma, but also Trojan horsing somebody into coming to their own realization that they need something. I found really great talent there. I would just say it's less about finding a new well of talent and more, I always encourage people to stop limiting your talent pool. Do you really need a Harvard educated person to be a BDR? Do you really need somebody to have gone to college for that?
Right.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
The best CSM I've ever hired had a high school diploma.
Yeah.
There was nothing, she had all the skills needed and she had worked her way up and learned in real time. So do you really need a college degree? Do you really need SaaS selling experience? Do you really need InsurTech selling experience?
Right.
Think about when you put the requirements in for your job, why does not having that prevent you from being successful? And if you're really honest with yourself, especially I'd say for a sales role with 3 years of experience or less, you could probably cut that list down to 1 or 2 bullet points if you're really honest with
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
And so be open-minded. And you don't need to be a D1 soccer player to be successful. You could be a debate team champion. I don't know. Now
Yeah.
I'm
No,
just being silly, but like
yeah.
don't limit your own thinking.
No, I get it. And what comes to mind is me being in the AI business. We're looking at prompt engineers for AI. And so we're looking for prompt engineers. And I started, and our CTO said at one point, okay, and by the way, it was a Friday afternoon, and he and I were kind of doing a happy hour. He was in his garage where he makes his own cider in Evansville, Indiana, and drinking some cider, and I believe had a little buzz going. And he's like, you know what we should do? We should go to schools right now, and we should find people that are in library sciences for a prompt engineer for AI. And my initial reaction was, that's either brilliant or stupid. I'm not sure which one. Like we're gonna but that's and you know what, by the way, he was right. As I started, and this was just his gut, that prompt engineering with AI, brand new job, is about words and wordsmithing and speaking to the AI in a way. And so that's what comes to mind in terms of opening up. So yeah, it's interesting to me, sort of pulling some of the stuff together we've talked about. One, as leaders of sales, like our primary job is not hiring. And it just occurred to me that like we need an outline or a course to get really good at it. We need to be really proactive. And I think you made a bunch of great points. One is that the world has shifted, right? So, but we might be hiring in the old way. The world is more diverse, which should impact how we're sourcing and how we're interviewing. Skills have therefore changed. The interview should change. The source of where we get these people should change. Yeah, I think for me, it's a great wake up call, and I think a great prep for anybody who is either new or been doing this for a while. Probably even more helpful to people who've been doing it for a while to undo some thinking.
Well, and I know we're the focus was hiring, but there's this whole other topic, which is, okay, I've done all this. I've broadened my thinking. I've hired a more diverse sales team to match my more diverse buying pool. The next step is being able to manage to these diverse people on your team. That you can't hire a diverse group of people and then use the same playbook you've been using with every single person that's been on your team for the last 10 years. The job of the sales manager is getting more and more complicated by the day, because you do need to expand your thinking on the talent you're bringing in the door, and then you have to learn how to nurture that talent in a way that probably is you yourself need to have a beginner's mindset.
Yes.
On how do I manage a Gen Z versus a Gen X employee? Your style is not going to cut it. You have to flex.
There's so much, and I think we can nail COVID with a lot of this, but so much shift that then shifts everything, like the way people buy, the complexity of buys, the self-serve buying, and then how does that impact what we're talking about, which is training. And then you're right too, with diversity and the way the world has changed and the way what humans value these days. It's like that also impacts the way we lead, which could be the next time we talk. I might come back and find you again to talk more, because I really do think that's a really big deal. I was speaking with the chief customer officer for Newman's Own, and he talked a lot about that he allows his reps to be vulnerable. Like he makes it a safe environment for them. And that's not something I heard 10 years ago, that a good sales leader should allow people to be vulnerable and make it safe for them. But I think it is important for humans who are in the workforce today. So I think that would be a really cool subject. And I would love to talk to you again. This has been really fun. I totally appreciate your time and look forward to our next one.